Well, this is Douglas Noble of the NABWMT History and Legacy Project, and this morning we're in San Francisco at the NA 20th Annual Convention, interviewing Al Benvenuti, one of the founding members of BWMT Detroit, longtime member and co-chair of that chapter, and former co-chair of the National Association. Good morning.
Good morning.
When did you first join BWMT?
January of 1981.
And what caused you to do so? What brought you aboard? What was your initial-
One of the fellas that was helping to put the chapter together said that what they did was they contacted people that they knew that were either friendly or dated interracially, crossed racial lines, period. And they said, we're putting this group together and we really want your support, and so on and so forth. So I was called and I said, great idea, I'll be there, but what can I do to help, and so on and so forth. And so that was the start of it. I believe in people should be free to date who they wish to date without being teased, or even just having friends of other cultures without being teased or harassed or whatever.
And you apparently had a community reputation for this.
Yes.
So what was it like? I mean, what was your first contact? You remember your first meeting, or how did it begin?
The first meeting in Detroit?
Yes.
We met in Mike's house, and
Who was Mike?
Mike was one of the original organizers,
Uh-huh.
and he stayed with the group maybe about a year, and then left the city, and so we moved on. We met in his living room, and there was probably 50 people of all shapes and sizes, colors, and everybody it was a nice big, and said, we want to put this organization together in Detroit, and we're looking for some supporters and some people who believe in it, and would you be interested? And we just all sat around and talked about it. And
what was your impression at that time? I mean, had you been in a large group interracial setting before? Or?
No. Well, I mean, other than my job, I mean, I work in an urban school district, so that I mean, I've been with people of color for 7 or 8 years in that sense. I mean, growing up in a predominantly white area and everything as a child, I mean, but teaching in an urban setting, so that I wasn't uncomfortable or it didn't bother me. In fact, I thought it was, like I said, I thought it was a great idea. This was something that I really thought was something that was needed.
So that first meeting was when? That was in 1981?
That was January of 1981.
81.
It was the last weekend of January. I don't remember the exact date.
And what happened after that meeting? Were there other meetings? Or
Yes.
did you form,
We actually we organized, and then we started talking to some other people, and there was a black and white couple that owned a bar called the Parsonage in Detroit, and they welcomed us to use their bar on a Sunday afternoons when they were basically closed. So we were meeting the last Sunday of the month at 4 o'clock at the Parsonage, and we did that for about just over a year. We met there and just had a wonderful time. The bar owners were just super. They we had an open door. I mean, and then with that it grew, where we started to figure out what direction we wanted our chapter, or at that time our organization, to go in. Were we going to be social, political? We had one young man that wanted us to have a group religion, and we realized right away, I mean, the whole room just went up ballistically, like, no, we don't even want to go there, let alone, because we figure probably our politics are similar, but when you get into religion, that crosses every barrier and line and everything that there is. So we just said no, and he was like, oh, okay. And
So at some point you established a more formal structure in the chapter?
It took us about 6 months, 4 months, between 4 and 6 months. By June, we had already created a 5-page, 6-page bylaw, very sparse, just basic, what officers' duties were, and what the statement of purpose and things of that nature. So it was a very, very loosely set up of bylaws. And the group was predominantly social, though we did have a political action committee We had some guys got together and started that, and we were targeting bars that we knew were carding racially, and we did some picketing in the early days and protesting and wrote them letters and did some things. So, but yeah, about 6 months. By June, May and June, we were asking for paid membership, and I think it was $15 per year, and we got up to 68 members paid that first year.
Now, you were involved in the leadership early on, is that right?
Yeah, I guess it's something in my little character. I got to be in the middle of things, be in the thick of it.
And
we at the beginning we just had a couple of spokespeople who ran the meetings for a number of months, and then we thought, okay, we're going to have a president and a vice president and secretary treasurer and so on and so forth. And as we were sitting there talking, I said at one of the meetings, I said, well, Mike was going to definitely be president. Mike is African American, and he was definitely going to be the president because he was the most vocal in moving this organization along in Detroit. And I said, well, if you can't make a meeting or something, I said, I can run a meeting. I've done parliamentary procedures and fraternities and other activities that I belong to. So I can run a meeting. So I said, if you need me to help, I'll do that. And so then one of the guys jumped up and said, oh, we got a vice president. And I thought, no, I don't want to be an officer. No, I'm not ready for that yet. No. And then they said they left it alone, and we went on and discussed some other things. And right at the end of the meeting that we had, it was like a steering committee meeting. One of the guys jumped up and said, I got it. We'll have co-chairs. Now, whether this has been already, it was a novel for us in Detroit. Whether any of the other chapters were already doing this in 80, 81, I don't know. I mean, I just didn't know what the other chapters were doing at that time. But we started right off with co-chairs, one white, one of color, and officers were to be mixed, and couldn't have just one person of color on the steering committee. We had to have a mixture. We also had 2 sergeant at arms we came up with so that we could have one of each color, and that sounds kind of silly, but more than one race. And then they were also our bouncers at that time, in the beginning. They collected money at the door, and they bounced people out if they were out of order,
I think your chapter is one of the few that has sergeant at arms.
Oh, really?
I think that's, yeah. Well, now, so you ended up, I think you told me you were co-chair of your chapter, what, 12 of the first 20 years, something like that?
Well, I was co-chair the first year, non-elected. It was just appointed that first year. And then I was elected in 82. 83, we had someone else co-chairs. And then from 84 to 90, through 90, I was co-chair. So, and then I wasn't co-chair for a year. For 91, I wasn't. No. 89, let's see. This is bad. I should have.
Well,
it doesn't matter. But anyways, and then after 90, and I was co-chair for 1 year. I wasn't. Between 89 and 90, I wasn't. 91, I mean. And then 91, I was co-chair. And then a couple of years into the 90s, I was co-chair, off and on, as other people. So I've done. In the early days, at one point, I was. This sounds really bad, but the chapter we were going through well, like many chapters, a regrowth, a resurgent, and the chapter had really declined in the early 80s. After this big boom, we went right down, because again, it was direction. What was the chapter going to be about? What we really going to do? What we weren't going to do, and so on and so forth. And we got into a lot of arguments, and so the chapter declined. And then with apathy, some of the officers just stopped functioning, and so we went through a real slow. So at one point, I was the co-chair. I was the elected co-chair. I took over the secretary's duties. I had to write the newsletter because our newsletter editor found out. So I was doing everything but treasurer. So it was.
So how did that? You said there was a debate over what direction the chapter was going. How did that finally get resolved, or is it still?
No, it's pretty much resolved. I think really what it was. The real issue was, I think more than anything, was how we were going to do things. Nobody was really hot to trot on whether that we weren't political enough or not, or whether we were too social or not. It was more of how we were going to do it. We were all on the same road. It was just what speed we wanted to go at and what kind of car we wanted to drive on the road. And some of the guys just, some people wanted to do it one way, and some of us wanted to do it another way, and it was just that friction.
Mm-hmm.
And we had an explosive meeting, general meeting, and that told the tale, and everybody just got so turned off that a lot of guys just said, I don't need this. It was just,
And that was early on?
That was in the early 80s, and that's when that was when we went through our decline.
Mm.
It just was so explosive, and it got so angry.
Mm-hmm.
People got just so angry, and then a lot of the people that really didn't understand what was going on, because this was done of all things, by some of the leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the people of the steering committee they were just so angry with each other that they just really butted heads. And it all came out in this one meeting, and there was no way of calming it down, stopping it, diverting it, or resolving it early, and it went on, and a lot of guys just said, I don't need this.
Where were you in this?
I was sitting in the room. I was in the room, and I kept my mouth shut. Hard to believe. I mean, as vocal as I usually am. I kept my mouth shut because I figured maybe this just needs to be aired. It just needs to get out, get exposed, put it on the table, and for once and for all, be done with it. Mm-hmm. And then we can move on. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize, I don't think anybody realized how detrimental it really was to the chapter for that time. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the guys just never came back. They just said, that's it. Most of the guys in Detroit joined it for fun, a social outlet. And they just weren't into all of that. I want to do it this way, and you want to do it that way, and I wasn't involved in the problem, and I stayed out of it.
Well, now, as you said, you formed in early '81, and of course,
Mm-hmm.
as you know, the first convention, the first national meeting was here in the summer of that year. What, if any, contact did you or your chapter have with the Michael Smith publication and or the first meeting here in San Francisco?
I know Mike from Detroit knew of it. I think he had the publications. I think he was on subscriber. We knew the convention was going to take place, and at that time I thought about coming to the convention, and I don't know why I didn't. I think it was just being early, and it was still early in my gay life, and I really wasn't sure what to do, if I should really get involved, being in education and everything. I was just kind of closeted with my job, and so I just didn't. I know a couple of guys did go, but when they came back, they reported what took place and everything, and it was just, we just moved on. They didn't stay with the group. And for not any one reason. I mean, they just didn't stay with the group. In the beginning, we had so many people come through our doors. We used to have meetings. We'd have over 100 people show up for a meeting in this bar. And when we talked about membership, of course, then they always disappeared. So with the National, it was just, we heard about it. I mean, we knew about the convention. We knew it was taking place, and then we got a report back from it. And it was like, okay, and that was all that was said. There was nothing like we need to get involved in this, we need to do this. It's just that this is what's going on at that time.
Mm-hmm. What about subsequent years, or maybe a better way of asking it is, what was your actual first involvement with the National?
The actual National probably was, the first convention I went to was 1988. And I got involved with the Long Range Planning Committee out of the House. But before that, it was just that we always heard about the problems the National was having, for whatever. I mean, there was always some turmoil going on. That you always hear the negative. And so, as at the time I was co-chair, I would just say, we've got enough problems of our own. Do we want to get involved on this level with, and go with the National? And most of the guys just kind of looked at me, and I think because we didn't have anybody involved with the National out of our chapter, they just didn't, I don't think there was any real caring about it. They just kind of, okay, fine, that sounds good, and it was left alone. And it wasn't until John and Paul went to Atlanta convention.
You're talking about John Kavanaugh and Paul Sears?
Yes. I wasn't sure whether I should use last
Yes,
names or
I
not.
think you can
Okay.
use.
Um,
Certainly, you can use their last
Yeah,
name.
right, yeah, you're right. Anyways, they went to convention, and they said, they came back and gave a wonderful report of what went on, the brotherhood, the camaraderie and everything, and so they just said, well, Al, what do you think? And I said, I'm one person. I realized I was co-chair for some of those years, but I always look at it as I'm just one person. I have one voice just like anybody else does in the chapter, and it was up to them to make up their own minds. And my stance was always, and for a number of years was, well, do we want to get involved or not? And a lot of times the guys would just sit there and just, I think out of apathy, because they didn't go to any conventions. They just didn't, and it was with Paul and John coming back and motivating, including myself, to participate, to get involved. We got involved with the regions, so that we were involved with other chapters. We weren't isolated. We would go to a lot of the regional chapters around us in the Midwest area. We would go to their anniversaries and participate in all kinds of things. In fact, that was one of the things when the Midwest region split, and it became the Heartland and the Midwest. I guess Ohio kept the Midwest name. Anyways, they split. And I just thought, I may be stepping on toes. I wasn't involved with the split. I wasn't an officer of those, because Detroit was not in that regional. I'm talking about regionals right now. But we always...
That split was geographical?
Yes, it was. I think
It wasn't a split over policy or...
I don't want to gossip and I don't want to step on toes. I never really knew what the full split was about. I don't know if it was personality or if it was because of geographic.
So who was in which region? I'm not...
Cleveland, Youngstown, Cincinnati was, I think, Columbus, I'm sorry, it was Columbus, was on and off, They stayed in the Ohio chapters as the Midwest. And then Chicago, Milwaukee, and there was Indianapolis was the Heartland. And that might have been because of the DRS.
And which group was Detroit with?
We weren't with either one officially in the beginning.
Uh-huh.
And so when we did join, we said, well, we're not going to pick and choose, we'll join both. And so what our attempt was is that we tried to get, we hosted a regional with our anniversary, but we hosted both of them. We set up rooms so that they could both meet. And then what Brad Grant, the other co-chair, and myself of Detroit, what we did was I went to one regional meeting and Brad went to the other. And then what we tried to do was talk to these guys at the end of the meeting about coming together and seeing if they could just kind of share some. Well, it was still, the division was still too new, I guess, and they just,
Which year
So,
was this?
This had to have been 85. I'm second guessing, but I would say 85, 84, 85. And so it wasn't until 89 that Matt Downing and I went to Tallahassee, when we were in Tallahassee. Well, I went to Tallahassee. I don't think Matt went. But we, as co-chairs of Detroit in 89, talked with the the Midwest chapters, Heartland, Midwest, what do you want to call them? Those chapters. We asked, let's meet at convention. And we sat down in Mike Warner's room, motel that he stayed in at convention. And we sat down and just presented the idea to them. And and it was based strictly on, it's good networking. If you have a bar you want to protest, and because of carding or whatever they might be doing, or a business is something that's being racist, your community might be, your chapter might only be able to bring 5 or 10 guys who are willing to picket in their own community. But if you give us your T-shirts and we all come in for the weekend, you might have 50 or 60 guys who are willing to picket, looking like they belong in your community because you were wearing your T-shirt, and so we can have a stronger force that we are not going to tolerate this kind of action in our community. And so that was one of the issues that I presented as an importance to create a unified region for our own defense and strength, besides the networking of, learning from each other's chapters, what works, what doesn't work, and so on and so forth. But the division I just thought was, so ridiculous. I don't really know why they split. I've heard a lot of little things, and nothing really, to me, was strong enough for a group to split. The reason I mentioned DRS is because I know that the state of Ohio funded the DRS.
That's the discrimination response system.
Yes. And they funded it, but only for the state of Ohio. So Chicago, Indianapolis, and Milwaukee were left out of that. And I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not. It may not have anything to do with it. I really was not involved in the regional level until, like I said, 85, 86. We did it twice. We tried to get the guys. They came to our chapter. They came to our meeting. They came to our anniversary. They partied with us. We had a wonderful time. They met separately, but they would not come together. They would not meet. And so, not until 89. And that was enough time. And obviously, as some individuals had left, and where it could heal itself, and we could move on. And then it was, now what do we call ourselves? Because the Midwest, the Heartland, and so they came up with the Midland. One word from each name combined, and so we're a happy little region now, and everything's good. So I feel good about that.
Now, the first convention you went to was Boston in '88.
Yes.
And that's interesting that you hadn't gone before then, and then 1 year after the near implosion of the whole organization in Milwaukee, you chose to go to Boston. What brought that about?
I think it was Paul Sears just kept encouraging me that, Al, you really need to go to a convention. You need to see it. You need to get out of Detroit. I'd already been working regionally and I'd already been doing a lot with them. And so, it was like, you just need to get out. And I think part of it was my own closetedness, and we all grow out of it at our own rate. And being in education, I don't care, the other teachers knew I was gay or not. I could care less about that. I didn't want the kids to know, because I didn't want them to feel intimidated or threatened, or that I was some kind of freak. When the kids would entrust in me, they looked up to me, or at least some of them did. You don't win them all over. But as just a non-sexual being, the teacher, and I'm supportive and caring and nurturing them, however their sexual orientation is, then I can be, as a non-sexual person, say to them, if they say to me that, well, I have these feelings for young men and da-da-da-da, or a girl comes and says, I have feelings, I can easily sit there as a neutral being and just say, well, that's okay, but you still need to, you need to talk to home, you need to da-da-da-da. So that, but if I'm the gay advocate in the building and the kids come to me, well, then it's, are you recruiting? Are you converting? Are you, and of course he's going to say it's okay for you to be gay because he's gay. And they're naturally going to support. So, I really kind of looked at it a lot, what I think a lot deeper than a lot of people would have looked at it, especially being in that position, is that I would do the kids more, I would be more beneficial for those students if I was this neutral being than, I was just the teacher. So anyways, 88, it was Paul Sears coaxed me into it. You need to see what it's all about. You need to go. I kept hearing from Paul and John about how conventions were going over the years and how things were coming together and so on and so forth. I had met a number of people from other chapters who had gotten on the board. I already knew Ken Allen. I knew Mike Warner. I knew a number of people that were already involved nationally, and they kept encouraging me, Al, you need to get to a convention and see for yourself what's what. And so it just happened to be Boston. It had nothing to do with the year before or anything. Milwaukee, it just happened to be the year that I went.
And do you think that now that you have become involved nationally, that it has changed your approach in your job, or has that changed, or do you?
No, my job is still the same. I think the one thing though, getting involved, not only locally. I mean, when I say locally, regionally, but also nationally, and especially nationally, is that I've always felt that I've been as an educator, a sensitive person to the needs of the students. But it has given me a better view and a different slant on being more sensitive to certain issues and not taking those things for granted. That, well, we all get over it, we all move on, and realize that some people have a harder time dealing with certain issues in their personal life. So I think in some ways it's made me a better teacher because I've been more sensitive in words that I might use or the way I might say something to a student, so that I've enjoyed, and I'm not sorry by no means that I did get involved. I sometimes regret that I didn't get involved earlier, or at least even started coming to conventions earlier, not, getting involved on the board and that kind of stuff. But just, I look back and I see, yeah, I missed out on some things, and it was due to my own, where I was at personally, emotionally, with my own self, my own gayness, and how I,
Well, what was that first convention like?
It was good. It was amazing. I know I'm an emotional person, but it was amazing that I found myself to feel like I had more logic than some people that were so outspoken. They were so emotional about how they felt that they really didn't look at the real logistics, and maybe that's because the educator that being an educator, you have to look at a wider view of things because you have 30, 40 some students sitting in front of you, all with different minds, and it was, I just thought, I just saw so many brilliant minds and so well eloquent speaking people with just, it was awe, and at the same time I was awe-stricken by the movement, the political, the emotion, and at the same time I was just, but why? Why aren't they coming together? It was, it was all this emotion, but it was the focus that wasn't there. I don't know if I'm explaining it right.
Well, did you see that just as a difference between individuals, or was that somewhat regional, or were there? What were these differences?
I sat in the House of Delegates, and some of the arguments that they were making was purely emotional, and there's nothing wrong with that. We all are emotional in our beliefs and things, and we're stronger on some things than others. But as an organization, there's still a line of business, and there's still a line of logic that it's just, you can't run it on just strictly emotion. No matter how fervent you are of it, it's still, you've got to have a solid foundation on this, not just your feelings and your emotion for it to succeed. And some of the things that they were arguing about, I just sat back.
Do you remember what some of those things were?
I remember one in particular, yes.
Yeah.
You really want me to speak on it?
It's up to you. Yes, I'd like you to speak on it if you feel comfortable.
The Stephen Fisher directory, it was in his hands, and they had been trying to get it from him. Now, I'm coming in as a total outsider in 1988. I had met Stephen at
Stephen was from Boston, is that right? Boston chapter.
I believe so. But I met Stephen in Indianapolis at an anniversary, and I met him at another chapter anniversary in the Midwest area. Mm-hmm. And so, nice guy. Of course, it's all social. You're just meeting somebody, nice guy, okay, And so I'm listening to these arguments about how they're going to get this directory from him. And there's no communication between these people and Stephen any longer. They have already gone to the point where they were so emotional about it that they were not rational, and they were not thinking about how do we get this from him? They just wanted to go to court. They wanted to, they were just going.
Well, what was this directory? I mean, what...
He had created a list of all the names, addresses, and phone numbers of anybody that had anything to do with BWMT, period, nationwide. I mean, if he could get your phone number at an anniversary, like let's say he came to Detroit's anniversary, and so he said, oh yeah, we talked and we chatted, oh really, can I get your name and address and we can talk and communicate? And he did this.
And he was actually the one of the secretaries, wasn't he?
At that
Yeah.
time, yes. And so he had put it on computer, and it was, he used some formula, so that even when it was printed out, you would see all these numbers and digits and things that you really weren't sure, unless you had his guide, you had no idea what they stood for and what this was. And I didn't have his guide, but I had seen the printout once.
So he was refusing to release this?
He refused to give it to the National. He was keeping it confidential. And they were just having a stroke over this.
And was that to protect people's privacy?
That was Stephen's viewpoint, was that he was protecting the privacy of the members and he wasn't going to give it over, and the people felt that this is NA material and they had every right to it. And it was their approach to him. Instead of, you have something I want, so I'm going to come to you, I would come very diplomatic and very reasonable and work out a solution and a system that would appease you and make you feel comfortable enough to turn this over to me and that you would trust me. But instead they were, you're going to give this to us. This is NA material, and and it was just, I'm just sitting there going, I don't believe these people. And and that's what I mean by, they were brilliant. When you listen to them speak, you knew these were well-educated men, these were leaders of their own communities, and yet they were just almost like children demanding to have their cookies and milk. And I'm just sitting back, and but see, I was removed from it. I was not a part of the ongoing onslaught to get this directory from him. And I know it went on for over a year. So, I know I'm speaking, probably some people that will see this will be very mad with me, but it was just, when I did get the floor, which I thought was, first time Al Benvenuti speaks at the NA, and I know that my reputation preceded me. I was told that many times.
And what was your reputation?
That I was a very difficult person to work with. I was a bitch. I just looked at them and I says, I don't understand what you're doing. I says, possession is 9/10 of the law, which probably pissed off everybody in the room. And if you want to get this from this man, I think that you would sit down and work with him rather than just demand at him. Because it was like children demanding. They were having a temper tantrum. That's how I saw it, really, as an outsider, first time view. But if somebody just coming in new sees it this way, I don't care how long you've been at it, I don't care how frustrated you are, that's what it was.
So,
and that's what I mean by when I said there's so many brilliant people in this organization, but they allow their emotions to dictate. And I understand that some things aren't very emotional, but they allow their emotions to dictate that intelligence, and it slows the process down for us to move forward.
Do you think that's changed over the years? Have you noticed conventions have changed? Or?
Yes. They're not as, to me, they're not as radical. I know I'm at some points, people probably look at me as being very, very conservative. I don't see the rabble-rouse, it seemed like in the mid-years for what we're talking about now, for me, was that it seemed like there was always something that took place at convention that caused the general membership to go out and protest. And there was always something that had to be very radical, and something had to be, they just had to get out and protest. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it was just, that's no longer there. That isn't there. We don't have, I think the last time I really saw a public display was 93, Chicago.
And do you think that's good or bad, or it's just happening?
It just happened. No, I don't think it's good or bad. It's just sign of the times, sign of the membership, with the direction they're going in. I mean, they're emotional. I don't know. It's just, I just don't see that anymore. I don't see that. You know, there's still emotion in the organization, and people are still very fervent, have those beliefs about, oh, this has got to be, and they're very emotional. But I don't see the rabble rousing, the get together, and we're going to go out and get to the streets and protest and make a very visual, verbal statement that we are here. And I think '93 was the last time it was done. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, because I'm not one to that's not my style, to go out and protest like that. That's just not my style. And so I'm not saying it's good or bad. I just think that I just noticed it's not there anymore.
Were you involved in the Detroit protest?
No, I was working that. I really was. Believe it or not, I was. I was teaching summer school that year.
Didn't that involve the TV station?
Yes, our PBS station. They would not air Tongues Untied, Marlon Riggs, and they wouldn't air it. And it was scheduled to be aired, and everything was. And then at the last minute, they pulled it. And so the guys got together, and it was in the morning. They went down to the TV station, which was only 3 blocks from the hotel, and they went down and protested. I mean, accolade, more power to you. It was every right to. John Teamer, Mike Warner went down and spoke to the station manager first and tried to get them to air it, and they really, I know that, both of them were very diplomatic, could be very diplomatic, and took care of business, and they were just, the station, for whatever reason, just wasn't going to bend. So then they went down in the morning and protest. I was at work, and I was kind of glad I was at work, because, like I said, that's not my style, to go out and picket.
Well, now you said when you came to that first convention, you immediately got on the long range planning committee. Is that right?
I got on the long range planning committee with.
What did that involve? What was your work there?
It's kind of like I guess it was kind of like the 5-year plan that Les Everett and his committee put together. It was a house-based committee to determine the needs and the desires and the direction that the board should take. And what we did was we met with Mark Mitchell in Kansas City, and we met in Dallas, but mainly we kept going back to Kansas City, and we met 3 times a year. I think it was twice a year. And I was on the committee from '89 to '91, and we set up goals for the NA. We put together reporting forms for the board. We did a number of things to help build better communication, which seemed to have been a problem back then. To be honest with you, some of the goals, I don't know if we ever really obtained any of them. In '92, the committee dissolved. Just lack of interest from the House, I guess. I mean, I don't mean to insult anybody in '92 that was in the House that was interested in doing it, but the leadership, just the 2 chairs of the committee stopped being the chairs, and no one picked up the reins, and it just died.
Who?
John Williams and Chris Hansen.
Were the 2 chairs?
Were the 2 chairs. And they, they stepped down. Reach a point where you need to step down. They stepped down, and nobody else picked up the reins, and that was when we moved to Speaker of the House. That was the first year we had speakers, and the committee I think it died. Just kind of got lost in the shuffle of reorganizing the House, and it just never picked up.
Do you think some of your work in that committee was picked up or carried over in the 5-year plan? Do you think
probably so. I know that the reporting system that we developed, that we wanted the board to use, I know that is still somewhat in effect.
The reporting system for
directors and their liaisons with the chapters and such, getting a better communication, and just some of the I think it was just the routine that it became ingrained that these are your chapters. You need to meet with them once a month, or communicate with them once a month, and so on and so on. So on. That I think that some of that is still I'm going. It may not be as formal as it was when we initially planned it, but I think it's still. Other than that, I don't know. I haven't been involved with the board's actions, so it's kind of hard in the last couple of years. It's hard to say whether or not some of those, and I've forgotten what some of those goals are now. I mean, it's been so long.
Well, now, at some point, you came onto the NA board, is that right? When was that, and what occasioned that?
Tallahassee, '89, I ran for the board of directors. Actually, I ran in Boston. I don't know why, but I did. They were, in fact, it was Gavin running around trying to recruit people to run for directorship. And Gavin said, well, you need to run. You're a leader of Detroit chapter. Come on, so I didn't know what I was doing, and so I ran. Of course, I was, nobody knew me, or they didn't know me, one or the other. Anyways, I didn't win. But I thought, no, this is something I think I want to do. So in '89, I ran again, and then I was elected. And I just felt that, not to say that I'm so great or wonderful and I've got all these brilliant ideas and such, but I just wanted to give, and I wanted to do something to help make the organization better, to help continue its growth and direction. And at the same time, I learned an awful lot too.
What did you learn?
I mean, it was what I said earlier about, dealing with people, and mostly it's really the thing I think I learned more than anything is dealing with people and seeing the different viewpoint. I mean, I've always been open-minded with that. I've always been a very open-minded person, and if you can show me why your idea is better than mine or the one that I'm following, let's go with it. And I've always been very open-minded. This organization, because of its diversity, has opened it even wider, my mind, into seeing far more viewpoints that I know I would have never seen if I never got involved with BWT at all. If I had just stayed in my own little world in Detroit, ran around with the same old gay friends and did the same old things, and even though you travel and everything, but I would have never really met the people that I have met with the diversity, because a lot of things that we meet because of this organization. And so many of those things, when you sit down and talk to them, you realize, brilliant, intelligent, but in some ways we have absolutely nothing in common. And then had we met at a party or at a function somewhere through mutual friends, it would have been, oh, that was a nice, interesting person, but because there was no other connection than that, you'd have gone on your merry way and you'd have been right back where you always were. So, if anything, this organization has been a great teacher. It has been a great educator to its membership, to accept and to understand the diversity that's there in the world, or in our own country, let alone our own gay community. That it's not all just simple, we're all gay and we all think the same, and we all like Marilyn Monroe.
What type of work did you do on the board?
What did I do as a director? As a director, well, liaison. My basic committee work that I ended up was the convention manual. That was the only committee I headed. Other than that, I sat on a few other committees that I just helped. I was liaison for the long-range planning committee when I was